Okay, we're recording now. Sorry about that. He advocates for fire safety code development and adoption and conducts presentations nationally on topics associated with community risk reduction, standards and regulations, leadership, emergency operations, and management. His responsibilities included the management of the Fire Marshal's office, public education section, community relations, media and public affairs officers, and the county's emergency management office. Robbie's guest, who may or may not be calling in later today, is the NFPA, again, which is the National Fire Protection Association, Regional Director Kelly Ransdell. So please welcome Robbie, and Robbie, you can unmute and take it away.
Hey, thanks, Melanie, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And Kelly is on. Kelly Ransdell is my counterpart in several other states, kind of Louisiana, Texas, and points west. But Kelly just assumed the role of regional director, and she's kind of sitting in on a couple of our presentations to kind of get more up to speed on the regional operation. She's been with NFPA for many years as a public education specialist, and she's just gotten promoted. So Kelly, thanks for being on and welcome. To the group, and Melanie, thanks for having us. This unique time since March has given us the opportunity to kind of reach out through this kind of platform to a lot more stakeholders that we want to be engaged with, to include folks like yourselves and building managers and engineers, to try to share some of the materials that we have available to you, and mostly free information. One of the things that's great about my job and that made it so appealing to me when I left the fire department was this is not a sales position. And if you guys and gals purchase one thing out of this presentation later on, awesome. If you get nothing from a paid perspective out of this presentation, I've still accomplished my mission, because my job is really to talk to folks, to get engaged with stakeholders and have these types of conversations. And hopefully very soon, a lot more in person. Just day before yesterday, I had my first in-person meeting with the Sprinkler Association just outside of Orlando. And I was telling them then it was my first three-dimensional meeting since March the 12th. So hopefully that's a sign of the times and we can get back together in person pretty soon here. So I'm going to share my screen. And Melanie, if it doesn't pop up right there, just let me know. With that first slide, it should be coming up there in a second. And
Yep.
Kind of get started with the formal part of this. If I can get this a little bit further out of my way, make sure I get it organized. So again, this is really an introduction to NFPA and who we are. And through this Corona time, some of our other colleagues have reached out to organizations like BOMA and the International Facilities Managers Association and some of those other kind of stakeholder groups that we've traditionally not been engaged with in the past. And what we're learning from folks like you is that there's not a lot of awareness of what NFPA truly has to offer and what things we do. So that's the biggest part of the objective for today, is kind of introduce you folks to who NFPA is, what we do, and a lot of the free resources that we do have available. So who we are is NFPA is a global nonprofit organization established back in 1896. And we came about because in New England at the time, there were 9 different standards within 100 miles of the city of Boston for how to install sprinkler systems. It was kind of the early birthplace of sprinklers in New England. There were a lot of different organizations creating different ways to put sprinkler systems in. And actually the insurance industry and the sprinkler installation industry got together and said, hey, we want one set of rules to operate by. And that's kind of the basis and the form of where NFPA came from overall. Sprinklers and the National Electric Code, which are 2 of our hallmark standards that are out there that are probably the biggest, most widely used standards worldwide, are still part of the NFPA family now. And that's really the backbone of what we do. We do have over 60,000 members worldwide. And as an organization, we're devoted to eliminating death and injury and property and economic loss due to fire and electrical related hazards. But our real mission statement is to reduce loss with information, knowledge, and a passion. And that's part of what I do and our colleagues do in our regional operations division and our outreach and advocacy is try to promote the type of information and the knowledge that we have available to folks like yourselves, as well as the authorities having jurisdictions that enforce the code. So just a little bit of an overview of the organization. Because we are an organization, we have a board of directors. They're elected on an annual basis, but that board appoints a standards council. And that standards council is really where the lion's share of the formal work goes about within the organization. They both appoint people to the technical committees, they approve standards. We've got a couple of them that are in the pipeline that the standards council is considering now. And they're the ones that actually make the decision of, yes, we're going to create this new document, or that topic is going to be placed within another existing document. So they kind of organize what the standards are, how they fit together, and how they're developed. But the backbreaking work of our standards development process is done in technical committees. These technical committees that are responsible for each one of our standards are groups of anywhere from 25 to maybe 40 people of subject matter experts. That includes the users of our code, the enforcers of our code, subject matter experts, manufacturers, the insurance industry, that all come together in a balanced forum to do the work to develop our standards. So that's just a little bit of an overview. I could delve for 30 minutes into the weeds of how the technical committees work and how the standards processes get developed. But just to keep this a little high level. And if you want more information on that, certainly we can get back together at a later time, or we can get in touch after this and we can talk more about that. But all of our standards are really developed, in our philosophy within an FPA is in the backdrop of something called the fire and life safety ecosystem. And all of these 8 components of the ecosystem work together to create a safe community, safe building, safe workplace for people in our community. And again, this is another one of those things I could go into each one of these cogs for probably 20 minutes talking about what they do and how they interact with each other. But there's a few of them that I kind of wanted to highlight very briefly with this group that I think are probably the most influential within this group. The first cog is really code compliance. And when I came on board with FPA just about 3 years ago now, this model was being developed. And one of the things that we were discussing at the time was, should this cog be called code compliance or code enforcement? And as a fire marshal back in my old department, I would tell the new people who would come on to my staff that your job is not to enforce the code. Your job is to make sure that we have code compliance. And I always told my staff that if you had to jump to issuing a summons, which is kind of the big hammer for getting someone to comply with the code, you failed at your job. Because our job was I saw our job more as an educator, both in what the codes were, how to comply with the codes, but why folks needed to be in compliance with the code to make their businesses and their properties and their employees more safe. So NFPA went with this code compliance cog rather than code enforcement, because realistically, that's the goal, not to enforce the code, but to actually have code compliance within the community. The second cog would be an investment in safety. And unfortunately, a lot of times code compliance does come with a cost, but we, as a lot of other people, see this cost as an investment in safety. And realistically, if you look at the business side of things and the return on investment, FEMA did a study a few years ago that showed that for every $1 invested in mitigating risks and hazards, $10 is saved for the recovery and rebuilding. So we've been able to quantify that from a business perspective, that if we spend $1, we'll save $1 if a disaster could actually happen to us. The two other cogs that are kind of intertwined I bring up together is an informed public and a skilled workforce. And depending upon what environment you're in, this may be one and the same. We want the people who work in our building to be aware and informed about what the codes are and what they mean and why it's important. One of the things we did with our schools back in Chesterfield is we had once a year, we would go in and actually talk to the teaching staff and the building staff and the administrators in each school and say, here are the big code things we see in your schools. Here's why it's important to be in compliance. And here's what it means if you're not. So we were informing the public as well as making them a skilled workforce. And the more knowledge they had, the more compliant we saw those schools with the with the fire code in our community. So we kind of saw those as two very integrated parts and tried to approach it with that aspect as well. The next two would be development and use of codes and standards and reference standards. And I'll dig into this topic just a little bit more here in a few moments. But really, we want to make sure that the new codes and standards are adopted and used in communities and states. If I look back to the codes that were in place when I first got into the office, the international codes and the 1990s editions of the NFPA standards, and what's changed since then, the enhancements, the cost savings in some cases, and the safety features that are in today's buildings and today's codes far outpace the safety measures that were used back in the 90s and 80s and so forth. So we advocate for using the most modern codes and standards and reference standards. And I have been engaged in the last couple of years with working with the Florida Building Commission as they've adopted the new International Building Code to make sure that whatever they're referencing from our documents is the most up to date and giving them resources as we can. So the new building code goes into effect December 31st this year, and that goes to pretty much the newest edition. All states are typically about 3 years behind, but that'll be the 2018 edition of the international codes. The last cog I wanted just to touch on is preparedness and emergency response. And while the bulk of that, when most of the organizations I speak with, when you see preparedness and emergency response, they talk really about the fire trucks and the ambulances and the police cars and that aspect, but it also addresses the preparedness and emergency response of building owners, building managers, and the occupants as well. And that's why things like the fire code have fire drills and evacuation drills and lockdown drills outlined in it, because it is making sure that the occupants are prepared and able to respond in emergency as well. And that's why NFPA has developed codes from not only the fire code and sprinkler code and the electrical code, but we've got standards that deal with active shooter and hostile event response, as well as how to prepare for and respond to those as well. If you want more information about the ecosystem, we publish in our bi-monthly magazine an ecosystem watch that talks a little bit about failures and successes and kind of illustrates how all these systems work together. And I'll have a list of a couple of other links at the end that you can do screenshots of or take note of as we go forward. But that, if you go to nfpa.org/ecosystem, you'll get things like this document here that really is the kind of a summary of what we found in 2019 that are the biggest ecosystem successes and failures. So that's out there to deal with. But more specifically about what NFPA does, these are kind of our 4 focus areas. And I want to talk just a few minutes about each one of those and some of the resources we've got available to it. The first one is our codes and standards. It is the backbone of what NFPA does, typically day in and day out. This is where we came from. We publish more than 300 different documents that range from the NFPA 13, which is the sprinkler standards, to the National Electric Code 72, which is the fire alarm and signaling code. But we also have standards out there about community risk reduction and planning and how fire prevention organizations should be established and things that they need to be doing to be really on the top edge of their game. But we also have some standards out there that even when I came on board, I didn't know about. We've got a standard on recreational vehicles. And I got a call one day about, hey, my RV has got this issue. And I'm like, what are you calling me for? And come to find out, sure enough, we've got a standard on recreational vehicles like campers and such that those do comply with our codes. And that was a new one that I hadn't heard of before. So it was pretty interesting. NFPA is one of a number of different standards development organizations, or SDOs, that are out there. And this is just a few of them. I bring up the International Code Council because that is the predominant building code in the US and in some international countries. But even though the state of Florida particularly adopts the International Building Code and the International Residential Code, there is still a great deal of NFPA influence or resources that are used within the international codes. Just for an example of the IBC, the International Building Code, which is the building code that would be the standard that most of your buildings were built to, there's about 150 different referenced standards in the IBC that are NFPA standards. So my old state of Virginia was an ICC state as well, and had many discussions with people who weren't familiar with how codes are set up. And when I tried to get involved with NFPA and the standards making process, they were like, oh, why do we need to do that? We're an ICC state. That's where we should be focusing our efforts. And I said, yes, but there's still 300 standards within NFPA that we utilize as well. So it is kind of a semi-incestuous relationship between all of these organizations. We kind of cross paths a little bit, but ICC and NFPA are pretty much connected as well. Our standards development process is an ANSI accredited consensus process. And really what that means is it's an open process. We have technical committees that review inputs and proposals, and anyone can submit a proposal to change any one of our standards. One of the misconceptions is that it's just NFPA staff that are up in Quincy going, oh, we need to change this or fix that. And in reality, I, as an NFPA staff person, can't have an influence on the standards making process. There's kind of a firewall built up between staff and the members of the technical committee, so that it is the users, the insurance industries, the enforcers who are the true developers and approvers of our codes. Our committees are balanced with no more than 1/3 of the committee representing in any one specific user group. There is a public review and debate. Before all this COVID hit, all of our technical committee meetings were held in person. Normally would have the bulk of the technical committee present, and then sometimes 10 and 15 different interested user groups from across the country attend, get involved in the conversations, present their positions, and kind of educate the committee on what the impact of a specific code change might be. And that debate and discussion and dialogue is really what makes our codes and the process so important. Since this COVID stuff has happened, I don't want to say it's actually enhanced it, because God forbid we actually wind up staying like this forever. But because of our technical committee process has to be ongoing as our standards are developed, we've gone to this kind of a format to have that debate. And we've actually seen more participation from organizations because they can do it remotely and virtually. So if you're interested in how to become involved in that, again, I don't want to dig into that in our time this morning, but I can certainly share that with you as well. But all of these committee meetings are publicized. They're public meetings. You can attend those either virtually or in person once we get back to that. So keep that in mind as we go through. One of the things I do want to share with you, and this is kind of one of the big takeaways I hope folks get out of this program this morning, is how to get more information about our specific standards that's out there on the web. We always get questions about how we can get this, and I only need this one little piece of information. I don't really want to go through the expense of purchasing a $30 book, and in some cases a couple of $100 worth of materials to get this standard or get the language that's in there. And one of the big things is we do offer free access. You can get onto the website to what we call the document information page and gain access to view the code or view the standard. You can't manipulate it. You can't copy and paste. You can't download it. You can't print it, but it is free access. You can look at it, review it. And then if it's something you do need to have a hard copy of, you can access some of our standards via PDF or order the book, certainly. But that free access link there on the document info page, and I'll talk about how to get to that specifically in just a few minutes, you can see what's there. A couple of other resources that are available, I'll kind of bring that up a little bit larger, is you can ask a technical question of NFPA engineering staff back in Quincy. This is one of the aspects that you do have to be a member of the organization to get for free. But hopefully my bosses aren't on, because a lot of the people who are asking just one-off questions, I'd encourage you to get in contact with me. And if it's just a question that's something pretty simple that I can get your answer for, I typically tell people to go there first. If you're not a member, send me an email and we can have a conversation. Maybe I can get you that information. That's one of the roles of the regional directors, is try to get information into the hands of the people who need it, like yourself. But if you're a member, we do drive people to that Ask a Technical Question portal, because you fill out a form, you get an email back from the technical staff, and that way. But again, I try to answer those questions for folks who are just asking the one question a year type of thing, and it's simple. I try to work with people to get that answer to them as well. One of the other big aspects of this document info page is what we call the news tab. And there's not a lot of information associated with, in this case, NFPA 25, the standard for inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based systems. that is free for download for use by either AHJs, the general public, or folks like yourselves who may need more information about it. And if you click on that button, you bring up a page that looks similar to this. And there's articles there. You may see information from the Fire Protection Research Foundation, which is this document that you would find here. They've done a lot of research on the effectiveness and how they work. And this one here may be of interest to some of you. It's water-based systems tagging. So if a contractor's come in and put some type of tag on your system, what does that mean? Why is it there? You can get information about that as well. And again, this changes based on the NFPA document you're looking at. So if you were to go to NFPA 13, you would get information about sprinkler systems. You go to NFPA 72, you get information about alarms and systems like that. So the information on that is very specific to whichever document you're looking at. And there's checklists, there's fact sheets, there's tip sheets, all associated with those documents. And again, the vast majority of them are on this page, are free to anybody to get in. You don't have to be a member, you don't have to pay for them, so they're free access. The other aspect that the NFPA does is, like I mentioned, we do have a Fire Protection Research Foundation wing. It's really a separate organization, but under the umbrella of NFPA, that does a lot of research and in some cases does some testing and evaluation as well. But a lot of information that's on the Fire Protection Research Foundation, in fact, all of the information that's on there is free for download and use. And to give you kind of a little bit of a snapshot of the type of things that the Research Foundation is doing, energy storage systems and lithium-ion batteries used in businesses and healthcare and even in homes these days has been a huge topic of conversation about how safe they are, how they react under fire conditions, and what happens when they reach this condition known as thermal runaway. And as a result of that, NFPA has published NFPA 855, which is the standard on installation and maintenance of energy storage systems, which realistically is so new, it's not out and being enforced yet, but a lot of small communities and some of the states are actually using as a baseline for some of their work going forward. But this is just one example of what the Research Foundation has done just around energy storage systems. And I bring that up because what they've done in relation to sprinkler systems and how sprinkler systems react to, or how battery energy storage systems react to sprinkler discharges. And one of the questions the technical committee had as they developed the standard was, is the standard sprinkler design that we have out there today, is that going to be effective in controlling these types of fires? So the Research Foundation did a lot of work over the last 8 or 9 years to say and find out what type of sprinklers and what type of design actually controls the fires. And that came out in some temporary amendments to NFPA 855 in the last couple of years. So that's the type of research they do. And this is just a couple of the documents that you can get to that are out there that may be of some interest to you. So you can see kind of the format of them. Some of them come out in really a downloadable PowerPoint PDF type presentation because they may be small or kind of short-term projects, but there are larger research projects like the one we did for vehicle fires and parking structures. And again, all of this information on the Research Foundation is pretty much easily free access, public downloadable, and encourage you to go out there to look at some of that. Other things we do are associated with training and education programs. So just as a kind of a background, I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this, but a lot of our training and education programs are fee-based. So you log in. Some of them are free. There's a lot of kind of shorter, smaller programs that are out there, particularly that we've developed for the fire service. One in particular dealing with flammable refrigerants that's out there on a free basis. So you could look into some of the free training we have as well. But a couple of programs that may be of interest, NFPA 80 is a training program that talks about balancing safety and security with fire doors and dampers. And there's a inspection, testing, and maintenance certification for training program as well. And one of the things that I've encouraged even building owners, and the point is that the more educated and aware that staff are about what the codes actually say, you actually keep the authorities having jurisdiction and the contractors honest. And I've encouraged a lot of the building owners that were in my jurisdiction, and we'd have conversations, and I would educate them on what the code is. And if they had a question or a comment about what my inspectors were doing or requiring, I never had a problem with that. I wanted to make them educated, because the more educated they are, the more in check they could keep some of the less scrupulous inspectors and contractors that are out there. So I just highlight that as well. All of our programs right now are online, and we had a transition to go to online programs before this COVID stuff hit, and it really ramped up in the first part of this year. So our training staff back at headquarters has been really innovative in how they develop our online training programs. They're very interactive. Gone are the days of getting the old VHS cassette tape, putting that in the player, push and play, and taking a nap for an hour. This one, you actually have to interact with it and do things within the program. So it is a pretty interactive program that they've developed, and I think it's a great opportunity. We do have certification programs as well, where you come out certified, whether you're a certified ITM specialist or certified emergency power systems specialist. And in some jurisdictions, a lot of businesses and building managers, they actually hire third-party contractors to come in and do their systems test and maintenance. There's nothing in the code that I'm aware of that says that building has to be inspected or the contractor has to come in and do it. We started working with a number of our companies back home to get them trained and to get them certified and how to do the routine inspection and testing, so that they didn't have to undergo the cost of hiring a contractor. And what we found with our school systems is, once the school system got these people certified and on board, they didn't have to have a third-party contractor to do that anymore. So these are the programs that can get you through that. The last two that are out there, certified electrical safety worker, that's there as well, and electrical safety compliance officer. Those are two programs that are actually recognized by OSHA to meet the 1910-120 standards on electrical safety as well. So I'll get away from the training stuff. Again, the focus of my this presentation is what you can get as John Q. Public, not a member, and download from the free side. But really, the bulk of what I do and the part of the organization that I work in is outreach and advocacy. And I mentioned earlier that part of my job is to engage with build relationships with our stakeholders. This opportunity, making the best of what we can out of COVID, has given us the opportunity to reach out to more organizations like BOMA, like IFMA, and some of the other kind of groups that we haven't had time to reach out to in the past, because we can do it virtually like this. But that is my job, is to build relationships. And what I take from you all when we could meet in person is to take what I'm hearing you need and what I'm hearing your concerns are about the codes that we have developed, and taking that back to our staff and going, hey, I heard from BOMA in Florida about this problem with how NFPA 25 works with 13 or the building code. We need to fix that. So I'm kind of the eyes and ears in the field for headquarters. Likewise, my job is to engage with members of BOMA and other organizations to kind of let you know what we have available. But the best part of my job is I don't have a sales goal. Like I said earlier, and if this group doesn't buy one nickel's worth of material from our organization after this program, I'm still going to be seen as doing my job, because I'm having this conversation with you guys today, and hopefully giving you some resources that can make your job a little bit easier. So that's kind of what my purpose is. We do, in the bulk of what we produce from an outreach and advocacy perspective, is free information and tools that we've developed. And largely, most of those are developed because of input that we get back from folks like you. Hey, we really could use a check sheet, just a one-pager on this particular topic. Hey, we've heard that 3 or 4 times. Let's develop that so that it's out there. And those are those tip sheets, infographics, and checklists that get produced. We produce a lot of social and electronic media, and I'll talk about a couple of those in just a few minutes. But general training and education, that's part of my job, is to do programs for organizations. And the bulk of what I did pre-September or March 12th this year was go out to fire marshals organizations, electrical inspectors organizations. I've been to a couple of different industry groups, conferences, and do a 1 or 2 hour presentation on either what we have to offer or specific information about our standards. NFPA 855 and NFPA 4 integrated systems testing are two of the kind of newer standards that are out there. And I've done a couple of dozen of those to organizations to get everyone aware of the material that's out there, how the code works, how the standards work. And generally that's free of charge. If you've got a in-person meeting coming up, hopefully next year, and you want some of that information, you want me to come to that and present some of those programs, certainly look forward to doing that. That's a free of charge. That's my job. That's what I do. So if you have that opportunity, I'd look forward to being able to do some of that with you as well. So that's part of the outreach and advocacy. The bulk of our public education efforts come out of the outreach and advocacy as well. And this, when I say public education, I'm really more focused on the general citizenry, the school kids, the folks who live in the communities. And I'd be remiss, and since Kelly's on here, she would certainly string me up because she's a huge fan of fire prevention and public education. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today is the anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire. And this week, every year in October, NFPA sponsors, and NFPA is recognized as hosting Fire Prevention Week. And it's the longest running public health and safety campaign in the U.S. And like I said, it was started to commemorate the Great Chicago Fire that started on October the 8th in 1871. And Fire Prevention Week has been running strong for 95 years now. So it is out there, and we know that we still know that cooking fires are the #1 cause of home fires. Homes are where people are dying in fires. 85% of the fire fatalities are associated with home fires. So this is my Fire Prevention Week plug to show you that we want to serve up fire safety in the kitchen this week and keep that on the radar. But so I'll get away from the Fire Prevention Week host. But if you want more information, that's on our public education side as well. A lot of free resources, free videos if you want to take that back home to your kids. And it is even available year round if you wanted to have a safety day in the office. And that information is certainly there to take and use for your staff and workers in your workplace. So it's free to use. Some of those, this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the fact sheets that are out there. A couple of them that may be of interest, particularly coming out of the COVID. We've seen a lot of buildings shuttered because people are working remotely. And as people come back to the office, we want to make sure that those buildings are safe. So some of this information is how to reopen buildings safely. Again, they're downloadable, free to use for the public. You can print them and share them pretty much widely within organizations. So other things that are out there, and we're seeing a greater proliferation of today is doing remote video inspections. And we've got a standard under development for that right now, but it's, again, not published. But we do have a fact sheet and a white paper that's associated with that. And this is the screenshot of the right side that's how to conduct remote video inspections. So some guidelines, both for the authority having jurisdiction, whoever's doing those inspections, as well as the facilities where we're doing the inspections. So again, that information is out there for free. And the one on the left is just a fact sheet about NFPA 80 and how to protect, or how the inspection process goes for fire rated assemblies in the businesses. Again, another free resource that's out there that can give you some information about how that standard is used, applied, and some of the key components of it. We do have a website specifically addressing the coronavirus. When in March and April, when this was really getting ramped up, we had a lot of information in there about how our standards interact with the coronavirus. One of the big ones that we produce is how firefighters clean their turnout gear and how it's disinfected. So we made some highlights and videos and some tip sheets associated with that for firefighters, because we were getting a lot of questions. And again, if we started getting questions from BOMA organizations about how does this apply in that setting, that's where we might put that. It hasn't been updated in a while, mostly because I think we're kind of in that, unfortunately, this steady state position now. So, but as more things come out, those get posted on the coronavirus page. I will highlight a couple of points here and actually make an ask of this group. We do have an NFPA podcast. It's published every other week. We've tried to craft it a little bit differently. They last anywhere from 50 to 60, 70 minutes. So we're shooting for that hour-long time frame. But one of the things that's interesting is I don't want to say got drugged in or volunteered, but I started asking questions about the podcast and could I get involved in it? And sure enough, now I'm neck deep in it. So a lot of these that are out there that I actually wound up talking with people who are in the field using our standards, finding out from them how they're using the standards and sharing that through the podcast. So one of the things that's out there, this one we did a few months ago about our battery powered world was pretty interesting, about what these systems are, how they work, what the codes and standards address, and how they react in a fire scenario was pretty interesting that I got to do some work on. So here comes the ask. I really want to make this podcast about BOMA, the fire service, the people who use our codes and standards, and share the good work that you guys are doing. So if you have an innovative program or project or something that you've used, whether NFPA produced it or not, I'd be interested in talking to you and getting a podcast segment produced to highlight that. One of the things, again, NFPA's mission is to share knowledge and information with a passion. And this is something I'm passionate about, been that way for many years. And if I can take stories that you're willing to share back to the podcast and share this more broadly, I think it's a win for everybody, and showing the benefits that you guys are doing in the workplace, that we can share that resource. One of the other things we have from a public information and education standpoint is we have a YouTube channel. You can certainly subscribe to the podcast, but those may take an hour of your time. The YouTube channel and the media we push out on that is typically less than 10 minutes. I think the longest one out there is about an 8 or 9 minute video, typically shooting for 5 minutes. Our engineering staff and the people who work on the electrical code will say, hey, let's learn something new. And they'll dive into a specific topic that relate to our codes and standards and just produce a 5-minute video on that to talk about it. You can subscribe to YouTube channel content. Again, another one of those free resources. And once NFPA uploads a new video, you get alerted that we've got a new video on the channel. Check it out. If it's something that doesn't apply, you can ignore it certainly and move on from there. But we try to push out some very timely stuff. You can see this one we put out just a month ago now, about the Beirut explosion. We published something with our engineers about how ammonium nitrate works, what it does, how the explosion could have happened. Again, that investigation continues, but they talk a lot about what happened in West Texas because it was a very similar incident. So some information about that, so you can subscribe and be aware of that. We do offer memberships, and I mentioned earlier, membership gets you some things, and membership does have its privileges within NFPA. The number one being, I think, from your perspective, is you get free access to this one-on-one expert technical questions that I mentioned earlier from the webpage. Again, as a member, you can get that. But again, I try to work with folks, particularly who don't have a routine need for those types of questions, to get them the information they need. So if you're not a member, certainly ask me and I can see what I can do for you. But you can see all the types of things. And the membership, if you can see it there, the 1-year membership for an individual is $175, but you do get discounts on materials if you are going to be buying those. So hopefully it's there. The very expensive one here, I'm going to talk about this one just for a second. It gets you access to the fire code subscription service, and it is pricey. I will be the first one to freely admit that it's expensive. And we've heard that as an FPA over the last several years. And that's the free access to all the standards that we produce, downloadable. You can view them remotely. You can work with them a little bit more effectively. But one of the things we're doing now is creating this NFPA link platform, and I'll touch on that in just a few minutes, but that's going to replace our subscription service in the year to come. If you do join, there's a mechanism to join sections within NFPA where you can kind of group with like-minded people. There's a fire marshal section, there's a healthcare section, and there's a building fire and safety systems section where you get information and access to information that community uses most often, and you can get into communications with other members in the section as well. So that's there available to you. But the NFPA link is the online platform where information gets shared. You can gain access to the standards, and I'm going to tell you not to buy something right now. NFPA Link is a subscription service. It is far cheaper than the subscription service that we've got available now. If you subscribe to it today, it costs you less than $10 a month on a subscription basis. You can get enterprise subscriptions where you get multiple users, but I'm not going to talk much about that. But I would ask you right now to wait on gaining access to that. Right now, we've only got the National Electric Code publicized or published within NLINC. That's our biggest document from a size standpoint. It's our most widely used document. It's our most technical document. And the team that developed this wanted to get that in the platform, get that right first, and every other standard that comes out is going to be pretty easy to get up and working. But NFPA 1, NFPA 101, and 70E are going to be published within that platform by the end of the year, hopefully. So if you use the NEC today, you can log into NFPA Link and get a 14-day free trial to see if it's something that you want to use and going forward. If you decide it's something you don't want to use, no harm, no foul. You've gotten to use it for a couple of weeks to test drive it. So I just mentioned that if you don't deal with the NEC, I would encourage you not to take advantage of that 14-day free trial now. Wait till some of the standards that are in the document or that you might be using to give that 14-day free trial a shot. These are a couple of the links to get you there. NFPA.org is obviously the homepage, the ecosystem I talked about. The document info pages, and I'll bring this up, NFPA.org/25 takes you to the page I had shown there a few minutes ago. It's the NFPA 25 document. If you want to learn about, get information about NFPA 13, that 25 changes to a 13. 101, it's 101. So that's the quick and easy way to get there. If you can't find it, certainly email me. That's my email address at the bottom. And again, my job is, I view it more of as a customer relations, stakeholder relations positions where I try to work with you to get you what you need as best I can, whether it's an answer from the technical side, resources that we've got available, or in-person training. Hopefully that's going to start happening again soon, that we can work with you. I know I think all of you are from Florida, so I'm the person there. If you're outside of Florida, our regional offices are listed there, and that's my email address. And to kind of wrap it up here, hey, under an hour, so I'm shooting for that. Our mantra has become, it's a big world, let's protect it together. And as a local fire official, I knew that I couldn't do my job the best I could unless I had the building managers, building engineers, building owners, the occupants, everybody working together to kind of make it a safer community for us. And I learned that early on. That's why we're here. We want to be a resource to you to help you do your job better, to get you the information you need to make your buildings and facilities as safe as they possibly could be. So I'm going to hush. I'm going to leave that up for just a minute if you want to take a quick screenshot of it. I can't see the chat right now, so I don't know if there are any questions in there.
Yeah.
But
I'll go ahead and address those if you'd like.
Okay,
Ryan.
sure.
Well, I have a question first. So I've been using the email address for you, J Dawson, and then you have R Dawson. So you do
both of them work. My name is James. I am a junior, so Dad got Jim. I got the middle name. So NFPA set me up first by J Dawson, and I said, hey, most people know me as Robbie. Can I get R Dawson? And they said, okay, we'll set it up so you can get both. So either one will work.
Okay, great. I didn't want people to get confused. So I did drop Robbie's email address in the chat if you guys want to take a peek at that. So we do have a question. I think Kelly has went ahead and has answered it. In Miami, we have a lot of primary language Spanish speakers. English would be the secondary language. So Kelly has now answered that they do have some Spanish materials and videos in Spanish. And if our question human, which is Hector Martinez, would send Robbie an email, we can let you know what he showed in Spanish. So yeah, that would help a lot of our South Florida humans down here.
And if there's, and I'll mention that if there's something that you need that we don't have yet published in Spanish, I'll get that back up to headquarters and say, hey, this is a need in South Florida. Can we get it translated into Spanish? And I don't think it can happen overnight, but it's something we can certainly work on and push forward for you.
That would be great because, the last thing we want is to have really good information and have people struggling, to try to convert it with the two different languages. I've barely got English mastered right now. So hats off to all of our dual and tri language speakers that we have. Does anybody else have any questions for Robbie or Kelly? Don't be shy. Unmute yourselves. Nothing? You guys know everything? That's amazing. I'm so
Yeah,
impressed.
I see one question there. Do you foresee any significant changes to NFPA design requirements as a result of COVID? Um, it- the biggest, not necessarily design requirements. I haven't seen any discussions or changes. I'm involved as an NFPA representative to the ICC code development process as well, and they're really in the deep throes of the cycle now, and I haven't seen anything come out as a result of that. Some of the things I have seen kind of interim, maybe interim, hopefully interim, and maybe they might evolve into more permanent changes, are how we deal, particularly with schools, about how we deal with evacuation drills to kind of focus on keeping social distance. And a lot of the states and local fire marshals have kind of given some modifications to the local drill requirements for schools that may or may not affect you folks, but that's happened. I would expect to see some changes as it relates to hand sanitizers. That's been a big change, not only from where they are located, the wall dispensing units, but how much and quantities can be stored, because it's an alcohol-based product. It does add to the flammability. I would bet that one of the next projects we'll see the Research Foundation looking at is how does hand sanitizer in the building or in the school space or office space change the fire environment if a fire occurs. So you may see some things like that. I don't see anything on the radar. It's not saying it won't happen. I don't see anything on the radar from a building construction, building code design perspective that's out there right now. So
Thank you. So my apologies if you already said this. Do you have a newsletter that goes out?
Uh, yes, typically it's associated with your memberships. So you'll get a kind of but you can access things like the NFPA Journal is a bi-monthly magazine that gets published. While if you're a member, you get a subscription to that. You get a hard copy delivered to you, but the journal is actually free for viewing on the website as well. So every other month the journal comes out. There's a lot of information in there about the ecosystem, about specific codes and standards, public education, significant fires. So that would be the source to go. There's also some chat groups in an NFPA Exchange. That's kind of our web board. That's free to access. You can see a lot of that. You can ask questions in there as well. But memberships get the newsletters, but the stuff you can get for free, you actually have to go in and look for it in most cases.
Okay, because
And I typically push information. If we've got something big news like the COVID response, anything coming out on new standards, I push that to organizations, and Melanie would get that. It's certainly free to share with the membership.
Yep.
I certainly try not to overload everybody's email box. So if you see something from me every couple of months, that's probably the routine pace that I push stuff out to organizations.
Yeah, we'd really like that, because I do want to be the conduit for our managers, engineers, and your organization.
Sure.
I would encourage y'all to join if you can, or at least use their website as a resource. We do have another question. Can you see it in the chat,
Yep.
Marcus?
Yeah, see it. There are bidirectional antenna amplifiers still going to be required nationwide in 2021, 2022. It's not, I say nationwide, it's in the model code. The building code is the one that has that in there now, the IBC. And I may be corrected if I'm wrong here, but the Florida code's adopting the 2018 edition of the building code, the IBC, International Building Code. And there are no significant changes to that part of the code for this update. There have been some conversations and some discussions in the code development community to change how those systems are installed, but they're so complex. They're so they differ from locality to locality, not just state to state. But the city of Tampa may have one type of system, and the city of Lakeland might have another different type of system. So I don't see any changes to what's been in the code from previous cycle to this upcoming one. And to be honest, I don't see a tremendous amount of change for code cycles coming forward because of that degree of complexity that's out there.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Thanks,
have
Marcus.
seen
Appreciate the question.
a lot of different answers depending on the municipalities here
Right.
in South Florida. And yeah, it's been a little bit challenging to get proper answers. And, you know, do we go to the fire department? Do we, you know, like who do we turn to for that type of information? It's different, right?
Yep. And it's different from locality to locality. My county, we had a communications department that managed all of our radio systems for police, fire, schools, the whole 9 yards. And they were the ones that kind of defined what our requirements were. And Virginia was a little bit odd. We didn't require the antenna. We required the infrastructure to be put in the buildings. And then we paid for the cabling, the transmitters, and all the hardware technology that would go in. So in the process, they had to work with our communications department to get what the standards and how, you know, size of conduit, you know, runs and that sort of thing. So it did change. You're right. It changes from everybody. Yeah.
Right, for sure. So if there are no further questions, I want to thank once again David Goldman, Bill Mueling, Kevin Norton, John Braun, all of our participants. If you guys enjoyed meeting as a big group between the two BOMAs, I'll be happy to continue to do it if it's appropriate. Thumbs up, thumbs down, don't care. Yeah, for the most part.
Thank you, Mel. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. The more we all get to know each other and the more we can help each other, I think it's awesome.
I absolutely agree. You're expanding your network of people who do, you know, similar jobs and so forth. So Kelly and Robbie, thanks again for making yourselves available to us. And
It's fine to do it.
see you on the next engineering Zoom call.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Melanie. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job, Robbie. Thanks.
Thanks for the backup, Kelly. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.